Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
This episode of Cut the Clutter is a 2-in-1, so fasten seat belts. Fasten seat belts also because we will switch from one topic to a radically different topic. I will talk about India's commissioning of the second nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed submarine for some time. And after that, I will take you to Dhaka, where our correspondent Ananya Bhardwaj has been reporting from. She is there and she'll join in from Dhaka and answer some questions and also give us an idea of what's happening in Bangladesh. So also unclutter that story for us a little bit. It's also because many of you have been asking me how we are covering Bangladesh, or if we are covering Bangladesh adequately enough. In fact, we are doing it more than adequately. I would say the best coverage of the developments in Bangladesh, the best, most reliable and also the most comprehensive has come at the print from Ananya Bhardwaj, and there are also some fine opinion articles that we published from noted Bangladeshi editors and authors, writers. Those I will share with you in the description. However, let me first talk about this new development. It is a development not just on the naval side, but it is on the strategic side. That's why this new boat which has been commissioned, the new submarine, that is under the Strategic Forces Command. It's not under the Navy. Strategic Forces Command now, which basically overlooks all of India's nuclear deterrence. India, as we know, has a no first use doctrine, which means India will never use the nukes first. But if any weapons of mass destruction of any size, strategic, tactical, thermonuclear, mini-nuclear, chemical, biological, whatever, any weapons of mass destruction of any type are used against India, then India's response will be massive and disproportionately so. That is the Indian nuclear doctrine in a sense, no first use. What no first use also then means is that means you are waiting, doctrinally, you are waiting for someone else to strike you first with a nuke or with a weapon of mass destruction. When that happens, the enemy will then try and take out all your capability to retaliate, because the enemy knows that you have the capability to retaliate, enough nukes to destroy any enemy. That's why the enemy in this case would try to take out all your deterrent weapons, because the enemy would generally know where your missiles are, where your nukes are stored. A lot of stuff floats around in satellites these days electronically. There's human intelligence. In any case, you can never be sure. That's why nuclear deterrent, particularly when you have no first use, a nuclear deterrent has to have a triad. Triad means one arm of the triad is what you have on the ground, which is your missile. So India has a series of the various versions of Prithvi missile going from 350 kilometers, which actually takes care of most of Pakistan, to higher ranges, and then Agni 1 to 5 going up to 5,000 kilometers. So that is the ground leg or land-based leg of India's triad. The second is air. Now India has a bunch of aircraft which can deliver gravity bombs. That's your Sukhois Mk-30Is, your Jaguars, Mirages, and definitely the Rafales now. However, as we go along, the role of gravity drop bombs is becoming less and less relevant. Once again, there, in the course of time, India will have to see if India can develop standoff missiles which are nuclear capable. That I know and I'm sure is a work in progress, because again, that's done by the strategic planners and also the scientists involved in the strategic weapon area. The third, however, without which triad can never be complete, is the submarine. The third element, however, the third dimension without which the triad cannot be complete is the marine dimension. So you can have nukes on your ships. That's only one part, but the ships can be found much easier then something else can be found, and that something else is submarine. Once again, if a submarine, like a conventional submarine, has to keep coming up to the surface every few days for snorkeling, for charging its batteries, even if it's a submarine that has air-independent propulsion, which means it can produce some power of its own without needing oxygen from the atmosphere, that is still not enough. At some point, the submarine will have to come out, and once it comes out, it can be tracked. On the other hand, you have submarines which have nuclear reactors in them. So they are nuclear powered. They can sit under the sea at great depths for a very long time, sometimes for months. It's tough to be a submariner in one of those machines, but those machines have a capability, and that is their role. Their role is to sit someplace where nobody can see them, nobody can sniff them out. Now, there are two categories of nuclear powered submarines also, as I'm sure many of you know, particularly all of those preparing for UPSC know all of this better than me. So there is SSNs and SSBNs. SSN is very simply submersible ship nuclear. This is a submarine which has a nuclear power plant, so it runs on nuclear energy, it can stay underground for a long time, all the attributes of an SSBN, except that it does not have nuclear ballistic missiles, it does not have nuclear weapons, otherwise it can stay underwater for a very long time, and to that extent is a big improvement over the usual diesel-electric submarines. The next weapon system, a more powerful SSN, usually larger because it also has to create space for silos to carry ballistic missiles which are not small, nuclear ballistic missiles. That is called SSBN, or Ship Submersible Ballistic Nuclear. SSBN. So what India has now commissioned is India's second SSBN. This is INS Arighat. The previous one, the first one commissioned in 2018, was India's first. That was INS Arihant. With INS Arihant, it was believed that India's triad is now becoming complete. This one makes it a bit more complete because if you have 2 or 3 of these boats, you need 2 or 3 of these so that at least one, if not 2, can always be underwater, can always be someplace where the enemy doesn't know, the likely enemy doesn't know where it is, because that gives you the deterrence. So Arihant has carried out a full tour of duty in the sense of carrying out a sea deterrence patrol. Now Arighat is out in the water, so we've got 2. Usually with such complex vehicles, you will think that at least one of the 2 or 3 will always be under maintenance, refurbishment. Also, these crews can't be out underwater for a very long time, forever. They do make a big sacrifice being underwater for months together in some cases. It's a 95-member crew, right? That's why India needs more. So the second one is now out. That strengthens India's deterrent triad, and soon enough, expectation is that very early in 2025, the third one, of which we don't have a name as yet, we don't have a confirmed name as yet. There is a lot of speculation because the first 2 are Ari is enemy. Both names, Arihant and Arighat, mean the same thing, that is destroyer of the enemy. So general speculation is that the third one will be called Aridaman, which also means destroyer of the enemy, because after all, what is a ballistic nuclear missile? It's a destroyer of the enemy. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. In fact, nuclear ashes and nuclear dust, I'm taking some liberties, leave it at that. So the third one will be up and running or up and floating, I would say, by early next year, probably as early as January or February. That work has gone on for some time. What does a boat like this mean? This submarine has a displacement of 6,000 tons. What does displacement mean when we talk of a ship or a submarine? That is basically the weight of the water that is displaced or that is pushed around when the vessel is put in water. This also means the weight of the vessel and all that it contains, which means all its fuel, all its weapons, its warlord, and also its personnel and khana pina, everything else goes on a boat, on a submarine. So a fully loaded Arihant class submarine, which is what Arighat is. The class is called Arihant class. Even when the third one comes, it will be called Arihant class. A fully loaded boat is 6,000 tons, 6,000 ton displacement, because it has a nuclear power plant. It has a nuclear reactor which produces 83 megawatts of power. Now, nuclear submarines that the Americans employ, that the Russians employ, that the Chinese employ, they have much bigger nuclear power plants. And India also has plans as it goes ahead to produce submarines, SSBNs with say 125 megawatts or more power. But in this case, 83 megawatts is enough. In any case, for an SSBN, at least the nuclear power plant must produce upwards of 20-25 megawatts. This one is 83, which gives it a fair bit of endurance, survivability, but also speed. That's why this submarine can run underwater. All submarines can run faster underwater than above water. It has one 7-blade propeller. It can run underwater at 24 knots. 1 knot is 1.852 kilometers. So that's an easy calculation. So 24 knots, which is about 45 kilometers per hour underwater, and above water 12 to 15 knots per hour, that is 22 to 28 kilometers per hour. That's much faster than your usual non-nuclear submarines. Its length is 101.6 meters and width, or which is called beam in naval terminology, is 11 meters. The next version, which is now being planned, not the third Arihant class, that will be the same size. The next version that's being planned, the improved version that's being planned, that will be 125 meters. That will be bigger. That will also carry bigger and the longer range missiles. This submarine carries missiles called K-15. K-15 is a missile in the 750 kilometer range. However, there is another missile under test, which is K-4. K-4 has by now been tested from a submerged platform, not from a submarine, but from a submerged platform. That K-4 can go up to 3,000 kilometers. So the calculation is that in the course of time, it will be possible even to install K-4 missiles onto the Arihant as well. In fact, when we look at the Chinese SSBNs, American SSBNs, they are much bigger. The Chinese are about 13,000 tons. That's twice as much as Arihant. In fact, even our next one will be the next version, the next edition. After the Arihant class, the next edition will be 7,000 tons and 125 meters, as I told you earlier. Chinese SSBNs, they've got 6 of them of Jin class. That's NATO classification. Jin class or JL3s, those are about 13,000 tons, and they have an onboard nuclear reactor that produces 190 megawatts of power. They also have missiles that can reach 10,000 kilometers, but don't let that spook you, because if the Chinese wanted to reach India, God forbid, they will not need 10,000 kilometers. Those are directed towards their main adversary, which is the US. We don't have any such concerns right now. For us, right now, the deterrence has to be with Pakistan, which is not that complex, and also with China. And that's why when the newer versions come up with a range of say 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 kilometers, that should suffice. Because I remember something that General Sundarji used to say in his public speeches and conferences in many track 2 groups, which I attended. I had the privilege of attending with him, which is also Dr. K. Subramaniam, the founder of modern Indian strategic thought, used to say that more is not needed when less is enough. Because the thing with nuclear strike is, if you are able to hit a few, if you are able to score a few hits, your job is done. The other factor with nuclear submarines is that counterintuitively, they are a bit noisier than diesel electric submarines. That's because they have a nuclear reactor and they have to keep circulating the coolant within, because the coolant is needed to cool the reactors, because reactors get hot. And that creates noises that anti-submarine warfare, very modern, very sophisticated anti-submarine warfare equipment can pick up. That's the reason you can't have nuclear submarines going too far away from you. That's the reason Indian nuclear submarines also, they might go to the other end of the Bay of Bengal, but They don't have to get that close to the Chinese. They don't have to go to the Pacific to be a deterrent to the Chinese. These are just a few factors which I thought I will mention to you. Now, see also how tough it is to realize these ideas or these dreams. It was in 1974 when Mrs. Gandhi tested the first nukes, Pokhran 1. That's when the Directorate of Marine Engineering started discussing or debating the feasibility of building nuclear propulsion in India. That is when the first project was started. It was still academic. It was called Project 932. This was 1974. Then there were rumors, stories. Some of us also might have done some stories as defense correspondents at that point, saying that there was a project called ATV, Advanced Technology Vehicle, ATV. But it was still not formally acknowledged. In 1998, for the first time, George Fernandes, who was then defense minister in Vajpayee government, he acknowledged it in parliament that there was a project called ATV that was on. Most of that work was being done at very protected facilities in Vizag. See, in the process, something else was happening. In the process, India had also acquired on lease 2 SSNs from Russia, or let me say, first from the Soviet Union, second from Russia, a Charlie class and an Akula class. These were nuclear-powered submarines, so Indian sailors, Indian officers, Indian engineers could train, could get used to a nuclear environment, working in a nuclear environment. And then there was concern that while the second leased submarines had been given back to the Russians because it had run its lease time, also it was quite old by now, there might be a gap. And if the gap is too long, then all the training and the learnings of these 2 SSNs will then go waste. And that's why it's important, first of all, that Arihant became operational in 2018, and now the second one has become operational. There are limits to how much I can talk about what exactly has gone into this submarine. It's quite a marvel, a technology marvel, particularly given the fact that many of the elements of it are still tightly controlled internationally. They are under export controls. A lot of the technologies, knowledge is under export controls, tight export controls. You can see what a big issue it is for the Australians now to build SSNs, nuclear submarines, in partnership with the Americans and with the British. That's the AUKUS program. And the first boats will come up maybe another 10 years from now. So it's a complex thing. In this situation, the first question you will ask me is, what fuel is going to be running these submarines? So these submarines used enriched uranium. Enriched, don't ask me enriched to what degree. Obviously, it's not enriched to weapons grade, which is what Iran might be trying to do, because that uranium is not meant to be used as a weapon. That uranium in the submarine's reactor is only to be used to generate energy, to generate electricity or power. It's driving a reactor. It's not loaded into a weapon. Yet, it has to be enriched. How India has got it, where India has got it from, it's not a question I can answer. Truth to tell, I don't know, but even if I knew it, I would not answer because it would not be relevant. The important thing I have to mention is that for such a thing to come into being, there's been a lot of involvement of the private sector. A lot of the work on the reactor, for example, has been done by Larsen & Toubro at its Hazira shipbuilding facility. These are private companies working in partnership with the government and government companies. So Larsen & Toubro at its Hazira shipbuilding facility, in fact, if you go to the Larsen & Toubro headquarters in Bombay, where I had the privilege of being hosted once by S.N. Subramaniam, the CMD of Larsen & Toubro, as you enter it, one of the proud displays there is a model of the Arihant class submarine, because they have played a stellar role in the building of the reactor. Then Tata Power Systems, they've worked on control systems, steam turbines, other systems have come from Walchand Nagar Industries. That's why this submarine, this great strategic asset, is a very good example of public-private partnership as well, and shows the engineering depth that India's private sector has also built over the decades. That said, I'm tempted to talk about other submarines or India's submarine fleet in general in comparison with Pakistan, China, etc. But I will leave that to another day, because that is all naval assets. This is not just a naval asset. The fact that it's in water, it's a submarine, yes, it is a naval asset, but otherwise it's purely a strategic asset, and that's why it's under the Strategic Forces Command. That said, I will now turn to Ananya Bhardwaj. I have a few questions for her. I will ask those questions, and as she answers those questions, you will find on your screen many of the stories she's done, the screenshots of those stories running or on your screen. All the links will be there with the description. You can check those out also at leisure. Hi Ananya, I'm so happy to see you speaking from Dhaka and looking happy for all the rigors that you've put in. You spend so much time in Dhaka now that you should almost feel like a resident of the place.
Yeah, that is true. And Dhaka traffic actually makes it worse. You're spending more time in one place than you usually do because even to cover 5 kilometers, it takes about sometimes an hour. So, yes, I've spent a lot of time on the road. Yes.
Well, I haven't traveled much in Bangladesh, but the couple of visits I've made to Dhaka, I can tell you that if you go to Dhaka, then you forgive Bengaluru and Mumbai, and for all the rude things
Absolutely.
you might have said about traffic there, Dhaka is much
I
worse.
can't agree more.
But traffic is the least of the issues right now, Ananya. Tell us, what is the current law and order situation? What is the general sentiment among people, especially students? What's the buzz?
Law and order situation, by and large, has improved. People have started going back to work. Markets are busy. Roads are busy. We can see police on the road because there was one week, about 6 to 7 days, when there was no police on the ground as they were themselves on a strike following attacks on policemen. So now the police is back on roads. Generally, there are two things that I would say when you talk about the sentiment of people. One is that people are happy that the Sheikh Hasina's rule has ended. When you speak to street hawkers, rickshaw wala, students, they said that this had to happen. The reason being, hawkers tell us, rickshaw walas tell us that we used to pay 100 takas, 200 takas every day as extortion money, as money to these people called linemen, and even the police would come and ask for money. So we couldn't refuse, otherwise we'd be put in jail. So we are very happy that nobody is coming to us asking for money now. So that is one thing. Secondly, when you talk to students, they said, this entire movement, they did not expect that this would lead to fall of Sheikh Hasina, but then they are happy that she's gone, and they have a lot of expectations from the interim government. In fact, when you talk about expectations, such are the expectations that there are so many sporadic protests that we have seen in Dhaka across departments, where maybe students are asking that their teacher, their principal, who was the Hasina confidential, step down. Then there is a general Ansar, which is like the home guard. They are demanding that they be given permanent posts in the government, and their salaries should be increased. Plus, there is a rest period of 6 months that these people get after every 3 years. That should be taken away. So there are these a lot of people are demanding reforms in their respective areas. Government people are asking for government. I mean, people are asking for government jobs, saying that we were sidelined and victimized during the Hasina regime. So you see a lot of these sporadic protests that are on. And again, like I said, there are a lot of expectations from the interim government as well, as to now at least something will positive will happen after so many years of them being victimized, sidelined, and oppressed.
So, what was the tipping point that led to this situation, and how did the movement turn violent and then suddenly also the violence died? What happened? This was a bit dramatic on either side.
Right. So when we talk to people, they tell us that the movement, the protest in itself was very peaceful. The students were very peaceful. There were protests happening across the Dhaka University areas of Dhaka, and in fact the rest of the country as well. But the tipping point came when the police started shooting the students to basically suppress that protest, and that is what really irked them, and that is how it turned so violent, that they started burning police stations. So many policemen were lynched, about 44 of them. Buildings were vandalized and cars were burnt. So that was the tipping point. And in fact, most of the people that we speak to tell us the same thing, that it wasn't the government is the agency that made this protest violent.
So, at which point did the attacks on the minorities, especially the Hindus, start, and and the places of worship, temples, etc.? Also, some Indian symbols, for example, the Indira Gandhi Center, that was torched. When did that start?
So that was also post when the students started getting aggressive. And that is a reaction of what happened when the police started firing bullets on students. Almost 66 of them died on the second day. Then a figure of 22 was coming on the next day. So about around 250 plus students, hawkers, etc., had died in just a span of 3 days. And that is how it turned violent. And that's the time when when we saw these attacks on minorities in certain sections of rural Dhaka. In fact, we were told that not many houses or families were attacked in the city, in Dhaka city, but in the rural areas those attacks were more than usual. In fact, we were also told that this attack on it should not be seen as an attack on minorities. It was basically, when so much was happening, it was so chaotic. There were some elements that turned violent, and they attacked these people because they were associated to Awami League in some way or the other. But then, of course, the Muhammad Yunus has in fact said that they acknowledge that this happened and it can't be glossed over.
Well, I mean, that's true. And I'm glad that I'm relieved that Mohammad Yunus honestly said that this happened, because somebody being connected with a political party can't be an excuse to target
Right.
them violently. And Bangladesh has had a history of Hindus being targeted, particularly when the parties of the right, Islamic right, feel the pressure. So 2013 was the last time there were sizable riots against the Hindu community, and that's when a bunch of Jamaat-e-Islami people were charged with crimes, and also Jamaat-e-Islami was barred by the Supreme Court from contesting elections. So Bangladesh has a difficult history on what happens to minorities whenever there's a political crisis, and that's what I think also raised concerns this time. So that's just for the perspective. Now, what are the priorities of the leaders of the interim government? It's still a regime. It's not really a government, because it's not a constitutional arrangement. It's a it's an arrangement. Let me just say that. How long do they see themselves doing this?
There is a lot of uncertainty as to how long this arrangement will go on. Some people say it might be, 1 year, 2 year, or even 5 years, 6 years. Nobody knows yet. The sentiment right now is actually reforms first and elections later. So, in fact, people are also talking about corruption, that that most of these departments were marred with corruption, whether it's the judiciary or it is the banking sector. They're talking about reforms in the economy, the election commission, talking about rigged elections that were rigged in the past 3 terms. So there is a lot. I mean, there is a lot on the plate of the interim Mohammed Yunus's interim government right now. We spoke to Nahid Islam, one of the advisors in the government, and he said that we are taking a lot of feedback from different bureaucrats and different departments as to what all needs to be done. So there's a mammoth task, in fact, in front of the government, the interim arrangement, because they are saying that we are looking for an overhaul of the entire system, which is required. So now people are also saying that what the first change that has to happen in the economy, in police reforms are required, judiciary. So a lot has to happen.
Well, I would say that that's a very high expectation of what is, after all, an interim government, and also shows lack of democratic patience. Because if you want all the reform done by an unelected government, then how can you be complaining about lack of democracy? So there are contradictions, but it's also a kind of a quick revolution, and there's an outcome that nobody was prepared for. You spoke with a senior leader of the Bangladesh National Party, BNP, that we published that interview, and we'll share a link. How are they looking at the future? Because with Awami League for now out of the way, they are the largest party.
Right. So we are saying that if we are ready for elections. In fact, Mr. Moin Khan told me that a political party like BNP, that has been the single largest opposition in Bangladesh, we are ready for an election. And Tariq Rahman, who is the son of the party chief Khalida Zia, he is the one who's doing all the work. He's the chairman. He's in UK, but he's handling all the party work from there. So if if say an election is announced and people of Bangladesh choose him as their leader, as the prime minister, then they are ready for the task. In fact, he also told me that it's going to be very different from Awami League, and he said, and I quote, that I guarantee we are not going to commit the mistakes that Awami League did. What Bangladesh needs right now is a democratic setup which it hasn't seen in the last 15 years.
Well, I mean, I don't think the setup was very democratic when Khalida Zia was in power either, particularly the second time. And remember that Jamaat-e Islami was her partner in that
Yes.
government. And then she had a
Yes.
four-party alliance. So all of that's known. What's his view on the Awami League contesting elections? Would he now like to have an election without the Awami League?
Yeah, I mean, when I spoke to him about Awami League, he said all the leaders are corrupt. They should be put behind bars. They have done so much. So basically saying that BNP is the only party. And then when I asked who are the other players, I mean, do you see any smaller parties coming up? So he says that everybody has a right to make their own party. If the students want, they can have their own party. There are other smaller parties as well, but one big party which remains in Bangladesh is BNP. Almost saying that it's our turn now.
Well, I mean, that shows you a pattern, because when Awami League was in power, they wanted an election without BNP. BNP wants an election without Awami League. So that's what I mean by democratic patience, because democracy is tedious business, and you need to develop that patience over time. Now tell me, let me ask you the last question now, because I have to let you go. You have other stuff to do. How is the India-Bangladesh relationship seen in public? Is there anger, disappointment? And if so, what's the way ahead?
People are angry, of course. Some say that we are angry, some say we are hurt, some are disappointed. When I speak to them on the ground, they tell me, are you here only to show temples that were broken or people who were attacked from the Hindu community? So I told them that no, we are here for basically collecting facts and showing what the truth is from the ground, and which is why we are here. We are not reporting from Delhi. We are here very much in Dhaka, among you, collecting all the facts from the ground. So of course, I mean, when you talk to them, the concerns, everybody voiced the same concerns. One is that Hasina is staying in India still. So they look at India as somebody who's supporting an autocrat and somebody who's against the Bangladeshi people. So they say that what in the mistake India made was that it was friends with a regime and not with the people of Bangladesh. So they are just protecting an autocrat. They should send her back. Second, what they say is that India has always made us feel like a subordinate. So that is the problem that they have with India. Thirdly, everybody says this, that your home minister used derogatory remarks for all the Bangladeshis, which is not acceptable. For how long can you keep calling us intruders or calling us termites? So stop looking down upon us. So that is what causes anger. So of course the media coverage that was done from India on minority attacks, what they say is that you chose to only show that one aspect of this entire protest, and you gave it a communal color when it was not. So ignoring the rest of the facts from the ground, you just picked up one. In fact, what they also say is that as a neighbor, you should have highlighted the facts of this story by different dimensions of this protest, why it became so violent, and what were the atrocities committed by Sheikh Hasina, which the world knows about, but India basically turned a blind eye towards that. So that is why they say that they are angry, but they never say that they don't need India as a friend. They always say that India and Bangladesh must maintain a good friendship. And in fact, like what the BNP leader told me, that India requires a change of heart. The Indian government policy makers have to look at Bangladesh from a different prism, not through the eyes of Sheikh Hasina and Awami.
Thank you, Ananya. Fine reporting, feet on the ground, eyewitness. That's the classical, old-fashioned journalism. So thank you for doing this. Stay safe. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir.